pleased to say I'm joined now by Dr. Swaminathan, Chief Scientist for the World Health Organization. We're very grateful to have you with us. Thank you for joining us from Chennai. We've heard a great deal of positive announcements in the last couple of weeks about vaccines. How optimistic are you feeling?
I'm feeling quite optimistic and encouraged by the news that we've been seeing, primarily because a few weeks ago, we weren't really sure whether it would be possible to develop a highly effective vaccine against the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And the results that we've seen now, or at least the preliminary results from several of the candidates that are in trials, give us hope that it is possible to develop a highly effective and hopefully a safe vaccine, and we need many more of those. So I think these are, even though they're preliminary results, they're very encouraging. They are the proof of principle that it's possible, and that really, for me, gives me a lot of hope, because we know that ultimately vaccines are going to be the solution that we use to find, to the end of the pandemic.
And it's very interesting that you say we need many more of those vaccines. Tell me why we should still keep on developing even as these announcements are made.
For several reasons. I think the first reason is that we still don't know much about some of these new platforms. And the vaccines that are being developed, as you know, are of a number of different types. There are the mRNA vaccines that we've seen in the news, very new technology, first time in humans. You have the viral vectored vaccines like the AstraZeneca Oxford one, also the Russian Gamaleya, there's the Chinese one, there are several, the Janssen one in development. Then you have the inactivated virus, the traditional way of developing vaccines. And then you have just the protein from the virus, the critical part of the protein that's bound to an adjuvant. Now, each of these, it's possible that they have slightly different ways in which they stimulate the immune system. Some of them may have immunity that's stronger. Some of them may have longer lasting immunity. Some will be safer to use in pregnant women, women of reproductive age. Some will work better in older people than other types of vaccines. And finally, some are going to be more affordable and easier to produce than the others and can be rapidly scaled up. Now, for the first time, the world is looking at vaccines in the billions of doses. We usually talk about vaccines in the hundreds of millions of doses because those are mostly the childhood vaccines that the world uses. And adult vaccination has not really been a program in most countries except for flu vaccine in some countries. So there are lots of firsts this time around. And then there are also the longer term safety considerations. We do need follow-up. And that's the reason why I said that it's important that trials must continue. Trials of these early vaccines that have given us some results, but also of the couple of dozen more that are currently in human trials. We need to get to the end of those to then have a choice, a basket of vaccines that we can choose from, and we'll be able to then target them to different situations in countries, to different populations.
Right.
Some, in fact, may be more effective in preventing infection, which will then cut transmission, than others, which might be more effective in preventing severe disease. So there are lots of different qualities and characteristics of these vaccines we need to understand better.
And once those questions that you still say are remaining have been answered, I mean, as you touched on there, would you feel that certain vaccines are likely to be rolled out in certain countries because of their various properties? One vaccine requiring extremely cold storage, which is certainly going to be an issue in some parts of the world.
That's right. So there are practical considerations of storage, of transportation, of delivery. I mean, ideally, we'd like to see a vaccine, let's say a nasal inhaled vaccine that doesn't require any injections. Or we would like to see a vaccine that needs room temperature storage that can be just given as a single dose that will confer long-term protection. So we have all of these ideal characteristics that we'd like to see. We'll have to see if any of these vaccines are able to achieve those. But that means the science needs to continue to be done. We have not really found the solution. And as you rightly pointed out, I think at the beginning, there's going to be small supply of a few candidate vaccines, which will need to be hopefully equitably distributed around the world. And that's where decisions on which vaccines are more suitable for which countries and which populations will be important, and the storage conditions is uh, one of those criteria. Is not the only one. When needed, we have delivered ultra cold storage requiring vaccines for Ebola, for example, in the DRC. So there are innovations. There are now ultra cold storage freezers that can operate, that can be without electricity, that can operate on solar power and so on. But scaling to the magnitude that we need in this pandemic is going to be a challenge.
Dr. Swaminathan, you have used the word preliminary stage during this interview. You say, in effect, we're at the start of the journey. Do you have an idea when, globally, we might be able to look at the situation and say, the worst is behind us?
I would say that we are now at a turning point. I really think that over this year, 2020, the virus has had the advantage. I think in 2021, human beings will take control. We will have the advantage because we now have the scientific tools at our disposal, not only vaccines, but much better diagnostics, as well as hopefully better treatments coming down the pipeline as well. So I think we should be able to, if we do the right things, have the upper hand over the virus in 2021. And by the big end of next year, I would think that we can begin to hope to start seeing an end, at least to the devastation that this virus has caused to the health systems, to our societies, to vulnerable people, particularly living in countries everywhere, and then really getting back into recovery in 2022. But I think next year should be a good one. But there are some principles that the whole world has to agree to and collaborate, and that is really the principle of solidarity and of equity. We have to share what we have in short supply equitably so that we can start beginning to see the